has taken over. Let's go. It's Ferrall. Coast to coast. Steaks, chicks, stacks. You and I are going to make a lot of money. It's Ferrall. Coast to coast.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy New Year's Eve. That's right. You got a few more hours to hang with us here on SportsGrid. Another show follows us, and then you can settle yourselves out and do whatever it is that you got planned to ring in 2025. But we are thrilled to be here with you this afternoon on Ferrall Coast to Coast. I am Adam Kaufman, Joe Pisapia here with me, and we've got you covered for the next few hours talking all things NFL, college football. Obviously, it's bowl season. Beyond that, you got the next round, the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff starting up tonight, and then games tomorrow, New Year's Day. We have NBA, we have NHL, there's college basketball. It's just sports, Joe. This is just such a wonderful time of year.
I'm exhausted, and we haven't even started yet. You know, I made a New Year's resolution, Adam, that you and I could do a show together in 2024. We just made it. We snuck it in under the wire. It was getting real close there by the end, but luckily we made it. And you're right. This is a great time for sports, too. The college football playoff, I think, is something that everybody's been super excited about. You got Penn State, Boise tonight. You got Ashton Genty looking for potential record-breaking moments. You got Penn State finally getting back. You know, I'm an older guy here in my 40s, so I remember back in the day when Penn State was that perennial national championship contender before the dark ages set in. So it's great to see Penn State kind of getting back into that conversation. And then, of course, we've got week 18 of NFL with basically a couple playoff matchups right there ahead of us, too. So it's going to be a good week for sports and certainly a good 48 hours at the very least.
I was going to say, when you say Joe Pa these days, it doesn't quite ring the same way as it once did, does it? Listen, you brought up the New Year's resolution there, and I love that. You know, we had to obviously hit the higher ups, make sure it could happen to sneak it in just before the calendar turned. But it does make me think of this, you know, and look, this is a New Year's Eve show. Why not start off a little goofy? But I'm asking you for a very specific reason as well. It's going to tie into where we're going next. Do you personally, because you bet, you play fantasy, you do it all, it's why you're here, do you have any New Year's betting resolutions?
New Year's betting resolution. You know, it's funny because last couple of years, the MLB market, as people who watch our show on Sunday know, it's been very good to us, especially the futures market. This year was rough, so now I've got to kind of get back to work a little bit. I took some baths there. Too many injuries between the Striders and the Acuñas really set me back. It was very frustrating. Not enough investment in Ohtani, unfortunately, for me going early in the year. From a fantasy perspective, I think I've already made a New Year's resolution. I'm going to stop drafting Christian Watson. Hopefully that will work out better for me because I love the talent. It seems like a great situation, but it's just never happening. I have to just grin and bear it and understand some things might just never come to fruition. So, yes, it's actually a good time of year to start reflecting on the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well and trying to learn from them in 2025. But hopefully, again, people have been watching the network or listening because when we talked about number one overall picks on our show, we said Christian McCaffrey had 417 combined touches last year. Just saying. That does not work out or bode well for the next season. Nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to listen. They still took him 1-1. And we all know the rest of that story. Brock Purdy ended up having more rushing yards than Christian McCaffrey this year. So that did not work out.
Yeah, my middle son in the family fantasy football league was feeling that. He took CMC and lamented it the entire season. I'm still, like today, after on the heels of me winning the championship, I'm still hearing about it. So believe me, there are people that are upset about CMC. So look, the reason I asked that question is for me, and I honestly, if I were to rewind the tape, I probably said the same thing a year ago. It's one of those like this time I mean it. I don't know about you and the way that you bet stylistically, but some people are very measured. You know, they'll have 3-5 plays in a given day. They're very, very selective. These are my plays, ride or die. I am not that way. I am a volume guy, kind of like some of the guys that, you know, will like Gabe Morency is coming on next. Gabe is definitely someone that will play a whole lot of plays. Volume beats variance is how I look at it. And generally speaking, that is true. That being said, my resolution would be to put just a little more stock in things that I truly, truly believe in. For instance,
that's a good one.
if I had, had honestly the sack to do it, I would have put my entire bankroll yesterday on the Detroit Lions to cover in San Francisco. There is no part of me, not a bone in my body, that believed that Detroit was not going to win that game going away. And I know it wasn't nearly as lopsided as I might have expected. Did cover the spread, the 3.5. It was just a 6-point win. Incredibly high scoring. The Niners wouldn't go away. If I had done it, if I had put a mortgage payment or more than that on Detroit in that game, I would have been sweating, because it was a sweaty situation. The Niners, they scored right out of the chute. It felt like a sign of things to come. First, 3 drives that San Francisco had? It was touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Brock Purdy, till that injury near the end of the game, he would not go away. All these wideouts would not go away. Hell, Isaac Guerrero would not go away. But I'll tell you what, God bless Dan Campbell. In a completely meaningless game, Joe, because it all comes down to Week 18 against Minnesota, between the Lions and the Vikings for the NFC North, for the NFC top seed in that first round bye overall. But Campbell said, no, we're playing this one straight. We don't care. And in a completely meaningless game, through caution of the win, risk injury, who cares? Goff, whole time. Gibbs, whole time. St. Brown, Laporta, you name it. 40 points in a game that meant squat. And, thank you, Dan. Thank you, PC Principal, for being you, man, because if I had believed going into that game that there was no risk of him pulling his starters, because that was the fear. If I had believed that there's no way he's pulling his starters, I would have put so much more on that game than I did.
First of all, love the PC Principal reference. We're getting along really well for the next 3 hours if we're going to just keep dropping South Park stuff here on the program. Your New Year's resolution for 2025 was actually mine for 2024, and I can assure you, sometimes just really going in on your gut instinct and saying, why am I overthinking this and not overthinking things? Because that's the problem. When you're an analyst, then you get paid to do this. You get paid to think about it. And then you get paid to think about it some more, and then study it some more, and then rethink it, and then listen to other people talk about it. And then sometimes that's just too much. So staying with the initial instincts is typically a good one at that. What about Dan Campbell suggested he wasn't personality-wise going to put the pedal to the metal? I don't know if there is a brake in his car, in his vehicle, which I imagine is some sort of pickup truck. I imagine that's got some sort of enormous towing power. And I can only assume.
Definitely.
Although I
it's
would
an
like
F-150. There's no question.
Although
it's a Ford Tundra. It's something
probably
that drives in the mud that you see in a commercial on TV.
Probably. But, it would be fun to see him in a Prius or something like that, too. I'm just saying, Dan Campbell trying to get out of this very small car. I will say this, though. Where I get concerned with Dan Campbell is in the spots that's coming up. And if there's something that we've seen with Dan Campbell is when they're playing these top opponents, sometimes this aggression goes too far. Sometimes he makes decisions and puts himself in situations. I mean, we dial back a couple weeks ago. I'm watching the Bills and Lions, and I'm screaming at the television. You have 12 minutes left. What are you doing? This isn't 2023 where you could surprise people with an onside kick anymore, because that I would understand. That I could get. You surprise somebody with an onside kick. Okay, nobody saw that coming. You know why? Because it's a stupid thing to do. So sure, you catch them by surprise and maybe you get the ball back. I know you get a ton of injuries. I know you're worried about Josh Allen and all that stuff, but you're at home and you are still in striking distance. It was a terrible move. You go back to the the NFC Championship game last year and the aggressiveness getting him into a bad situation there and eventually costing him that game against the 49ers. So he's got to figure that out, Adam, somewhere along this line, that he has to right that ship and start making some better decisions in these tight games against better opponents.
Roughly 160, 170 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs playing the role of both Sonic and Knuckles last night went off. He was incredible. I love this Detroit team. I do. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased because I lived in Detroit for a little less than a year, but that was so long ago. They sucked back then. They were the lousy Lions at that point in time. Not now, man. They are crazy. Speaking of crazy, I know, no Scott Ferrall today. We're still going to have a little crazy on the show because Sports Rage himself, Gabe Morency, joins us next year on Coast to Coast.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Back here on Ferrall Coast to Coast on SportsGrid, we have sidelined Joe Pisapia for just a little bit because we are bringing in a man who, honestly, I feel like I need to bow out. He's used to hosting programs here on the grid. We need to just give him all the space and time that he deserves over the next couple of segments. Gabe Morency, Mr. Sports Rage. Gabe, how are you, buddy? Happy early New Year to you.
Yeah, good to see you, Adam. Happy New Year. We're ready to rock. And speaking of hosting shows, we're counting down the hours until kickoff. We've got the Fiesta Bowl tonight. We'll be on live at 7:30 this evening for the Fiesta Bowl. Some in-game chaos and carnage. Really looking forward to this football game. I think people are sleeping on Boise State and underestimating them because they play in the Mountain West Conference. I've heard a lot of people say, well, Ashton Genty, what kind of competition did he do it against? Well, last time I checked, I know a lot of people that talk about college football don't actually watch the games. But last time I checked, he racked up 192 yards against the number one team in the country, the Oregon Ducks, on the road, albeit. His prop is high tonight at 129.5, but I can't wait for this game. And right now, my Michigan Wolverines trying to hang on against the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, it looks like Michigan, who just added a field goal, by the way. It is 19-10, about 7 minutes to go in regulation in that one. Looking to cap off, what is it, the ReliaQuest Bowl? I don't even know how to pronounce this bowl. This is one
ReliaQuest. No, there's less than a minute left now.
ReliaQuest.
There's less.
Oh, less than a minute. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's less than a minute left right now.
Update my feed here. Yeah, you're right. So the ReliaQuest. So 19-13, Alabama just got that field goal and is 4th and 10 to Michigan 15 with, like you said, less than a minute. So we'll see. Alabama, obviously, if it doesn't come through against your Wolverines, it's going to screw up probably a lot of parlays out there. But to your point, I hopped on Boise State plus 11.5. I bet the over 53.5, 54.5. It's climbed up a little bit as well. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm in Massachusetts, so I can't bet player props when it comes to these college guys. But you mentioned Genty, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Boise State's live to win this game. Never mind covering the spread. Would you sprinkle the money line?
Yeah, I actually would. I think they do have a legitimate chance of winning this football game. There's a lot of talk about James Franklin all the time. listen, Franklin's a great coach. He's a very, very good coach. Great coach. You got to fully win, I guess, to be called a great coach. He's a really, really good coach. And there was a lot of talk about, well, he doesn't win the big one, and you can't trust him in the big one. Beating SMU at home in the snow and cold weather is really not a big one, right? That was expected. SMU were in way over their heads. This is a neutral field, and if you're looking at past history too, there's some fun symmetry here. That Boise end up in the Fiesta Bowl. This is the famous Statue of Liberty play with Kellen Moore. They're 3-0 in the Fiesta Bowl. They've had a lot of great memories in this bowl game in Arizona. Boise fans travel as well as Penn State fans, so the atmosphere is going to be lit in that stadium. But Boise won't be overwhelmed, and their quarterback is good as well. It's too bad you can't get in on any props because I think their quarterback, number one, Ashton Genty's reception prop tonight is 1.5. All right, so will Genty catch 2 passes? I think he will. Penn State, and for the record, the Michigan Wolverines are going to beat the Alabama Crimson Tide 2 straight years in a row. Yeah. I'm getting great memories. I was there last year pretty much to the day. It was January 1st at the Rose Bowl. The stakes were a little bit higher, but I got to tell you what, if Alabama gets an invite to play Michigan at a bowl game next year, I think they're going to decline, Adam. They're going to want no part of this. And think about this, guys. Michigan beats Nick Saban, retires Nick Saban, then beats Kalen DeBoer and the Washington Huskies in a national championship game. Then Kalen DeBoer becomes the coach of Alabama, and they beat him. Like, I got to tell you, Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, they're never going to want to see the letter M again for a long time.
Yeah, so other than the Tide there, maybe getting a little future PTSD against these Wolverines. Real quick, I mean, what does this mean for your Wolverines program? Because like you said, national champs last year, Harbaugh leaves. This season, I think in a lot of ways, regular season was a disappointment compared to maybe expectation coming off of that title. But of course, you lose the quarterback too, J.J. McCarthy. So it's also something of a rebuild under Moore. They go out 7-5. Obviously, this big win over Alabama, big in stature, if nothing else, because I know it's not the college football playoff. But finishing things off at 8-5, good building block to next year, I imagine.
Well, Michigan have absolutely killed it in the offseason. Obviously getting the number one quarterback recruit in the country in Bryce Underwood. But it's continued. They stole 2 players from Bama over the last 10 days, right? So they've had a great recruiting class. And, this season was a little bit of a disappointment. I don't think anybody really thought that Michigan were going to make it back to the playoffs this year. Even the most ardent Michigan fan. Considering everything that they had lost, it was just too much to overcome. And not to mention their schedule, man. Michigan played, they played the Texas Longhorns, the Oregon Ducks, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. and the Indiana Hoosiers. Right? And and then the Washington Huskies. I can go on and on. Their schedule was a killer. Sure. It's too bad they stumbled a little bit early. I wonder if they didn't take their quarterback out, Davis Warren, earlier in the season. They benched him and then they went back to him. If they just would have stuck with him, they would have won a game or 2 more, and hey, maybe things would have been different. But hard not to say it was a successful season in the end. Building for the future. You beat Ohio State as 20-point underdogs, and you just beat Alabama as 17-point underdogs, right? And back-to-back games. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that as far as Michigan, all things concerned. So exciting times, man, for the Michigan Wolverine program moving forward. And now we kick back, and I would say, hope that Ohio State loses, but the Oregon Ducks are also a Big Ten rival now. But for the record, I do think the Ducks are going to beat them tomorrow.
Just as far as these games that are in progress right now, other bowl action, live betting opportunities, the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. This is such a stupid name. Louisville and Washington. This game has about 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. It is tied at 14. It wasn't all that far off from a pick'em going into the game, so things haven't really changed, except Washington, who I have on the money line pregame, is now at even money on the money line, sitting plus 1.5. That's with Louisville into Washington territory at the 31 on 2nd and 7. We got a break in a sec. Any quick thoughts on how this one plays out?
I think it's going to continue to be a trap. I like you to over it, over 59.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Gabe Morency back with us here on Ferrall Coast to Coast. Adam Kaufman in for Scotty today, and we'll have Joe Pisapia join us again in just a little bit as well. So, Gabe, Louisville, and you said it, points, man. 21-14 now after the Cardinals added a touchdown, and this game still has about 4.5 minutes to go in the second quarter. That's in the Sun Bowl. Over at the Citrus Bowl, a game that is really early on still, midway through the opening quarter. South Carolina up a field goal, 3-0 against Illinois. I'm on Illinois with the points pregame, got them plus 10.5. How did you feel about this one going in?
I can't disagree with that. I ended up playing South Carolina in moneyline parlays and in teasers, getting a head start. So I played a 10. I don't play a lot of college teasers. It's not the smartest thing to do, but these lines are sharp. And so basically I've got South Carolina to win the game. And now I've got Boise State plus 21.5 and over 44.5 leading into tonight. You know, I think Illinois are better. I think, Adam, you're kind of right that Illinois are better than people realize. Their defense isn't great. South Carolina are a better team. Let's just call it off what it is. But it's a lot of points to be laying. So I wouldn't be surprised if South Carolina wins a close one, you know, by 6, by 3, or something like that. But ultimately, South Carolina just has been playing so well, and their quarterback sellers I like better than Altmaier. And the game coming up right now, this should be another one, a fun one. For the record, guys, the total was just 59.5 in the Louisville-Washington game. It just popped up to 64.5. The Sun Bowl, one of the classic bowl games. I still think it goes over. There'll probably be more points before the end of the half here. There's still 4 minutes left, and there's big plays. And you've got two young quarterbacks. You got one really young quarterback with Washington, so he's sort of all or nothing. He threw a pick 6, but he also makes big plays. So I would expect there to be more points, guys. I would like the over 64.5 in the game. But speaking of points, Baylor and LSU should be a track meet, guys. Yeah, you look at this game, Adam. Baylor have really dialed it up, man. Right? Remember Aranda went in there and they were great. And then they sort of, they really hit a wall. They became like a 6-6 type of team. And you sort of forgot about the Baylor Bears. They're on a roll right now. They've won 6 football games in a row. And speaking of which, here's a big play for Washington. But they've won 6 games in a row. I don't think much of Kelly. Kelly just finds ways to lose games all the time. And people always liked them. Like the odds makers finally caught up and said, no, we're not making LSU a favorite here. So you got to lay the 3.5 in the game. I prefer the money line. I'm seeing a minus 165 right now. I like that, minus 165 on the money line for Baylor, and 62.5. I think the game goes over, Adam.
Okay, we were talking about the college football playoff again, quarterfinals. We're down to 8. We mentioned this Boise State game coming up a little bit later on tonight. It's the one that your show, Sports Rage, will be on opposite. Make sure people check it out, 7:30 Eastern here on the grid, Boise State and Penn State. But then, that's the appetizer, man. Tomorrow's the main course. We got 3 games. We got the other 3 teams that are going to ultimately advance and get to the Final Four here. So it's Texas, Arizona State, Ohio State, Oregon, and of course Notre Dame, Georgia. I think in a lot of ways the Notre Dame, Georgia game is the most interesting. On the one hand, you have Georgia, who's won 2 out of the last 3 national championships, won't have its starting quarterback. So, absent Beck, that's an issue. Notre Dame, a lot of people I feel like kind of looked going into the college football playoff as that. I know Indiana wasn't very good ultimately, but looked at that Notre Dame-Indiana game and said, whoever does win this game could be a live dog against Georgia in the next round. Do you see it that way? Would you, lay any money on the Fighting Irish here, not only to potentially win this game, but to advance in the college football playoff long range?
I think this Notre Dame team is better than the Brian Kelly Notre Dame teams, in the sense that, we saw Brian Kelly get Notre Dame to the playoffs or into big bowl games and on the old format, whatnot, and then get lit up and get overwhelmed. It'd be like, whoa, like the SEC teams are way too fast for Notre Dame. That's not the case anymore. Notre Dame are super athletic. Notre Dame have a bunch of dudes on the team that are going to the NFL. Freeman's done a nice job recruiting there. And in fact, if you took away their jersey and the leprechaun and everything, they're not really Notre Dame anymore. You know what I mean? Rudy ain't on this team, Adam. You know what I'm saying? They got a bunch of fast dudes. There's a bunch of sons of NFL players, and they're a good team. But I think Georgia in a big game, playing in the South in New Orleans, giving Kirby Smart a couple of weeks to prepare for them. I like the Georgia Bulldogs to win the football game. I think the Ducks win, and I think Texas are going to murder Arizona State.
All right. Because we got you on the...
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion, each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York team has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Our thanks again to Gabe Morency. Remember, he will be hosting Sports Rage here on SportsGrid coming up in 4 hours, taking you through all the great betting opportunities. I'm sure a lot of live betting opportunities during the Fiesta Bowl tonight. Make sure that you're tuning in for that because it's going to be fun. There's some money-making opportunities. And hopefully, for the sake of my wallet and Gabe's, Boise State takes care of business. We're going to find out what Mike DeCourcy here thinks. Joining us from Sporting News on Twitter at TSN Mike. Mike, happy holidays, happy early New Year. How are you?
I'm very well. Happy New Year to you as well, Adam.
So just, I appreciate that. Just before the holidays, just before Christmas, you wrote about how that just disgusting, embarrassing first round of the college football playoff with blowout after blowout after blowout. Like, I was tweeting about it at the time, like, my God, the first year of the new format, how the committee must be feeling right now with all the judgment going in, and then Indiana with that stinker that it had until, I guess, put up some too little, too late points toward the end of the game to make the score a little bit more respectable. But it was bad. The question is, though, because, you wrote about how maybe the format, the 12-team format needs to be reassessed and fixed and just how ugly it was, can all be forgiven now in this quarterfinal round if we get 4 good games? What does it ultimately do to the committee and to the sport where we're at, expanding from 4 to 12?
Well, I think in some ways, if we had 4 good games, it would affirm the decisions that the committee and the college football playoff at large made relative to the construction of the playoff. And I know they have input from conference commissioners and such. I love the college football playoff being 12 teams. I think that it absolutely is essential. I don't think there's any other word. Essential that there be automatic qualification for the 5 highest ranked conference champions. It's not a real playoff without that. But there's no rule that says, and certainly this doesn't apply in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, there's no rule that says you have to get an advantage seed because you won a conference. Lots of teams get number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament without winning their conferences, either regular season or the tournament. That happened with Tennessee in 2019, Pitt in 2009, off the top of my head examples, won neither their regular season or conference championships, but were judged to be one of the 4 best teams. So I don't think that seeding Boise State and Arizona State into the quarterfinals was the right call. Everything else they did was great, but doing that disadvantaged the first round, made it so there were more mismatches. Indiana versus Boise State might have been a great game, but we'll never know. And you look in the quarterfinals, and you've got Ohio State going in as a favorite against a team that's with an undefeated record and was the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. That doesn't seem right. That seems like there's a mismatch in seeding there. Mm-hmm. And then you have double-digit seed favorites that had to play in the first round and are now playing against quarterfinal opponents that got seeds. So I think the same about the NFL. The fact that either the Vikings or the Lions are going to have to go on the road and play against an 8 or 9 win team in a couple of weeks is ridiculous. But I think that the college football playoff should have followed the example of the superior postseason, and that's the NCAA tournament, not the NFL playoffs.
Do you think the expanded format really kind of further waters down these bowl games? Like, people should have, and maybe people were, but not to the degree that ordinarily they would be. We should have been elated to have, like, New Year's Eve, and we've got Alabama against Michigan. I know these 2 schools, these programs weren't this year what they have been historically. Certainly it wasn't the Rose Bowl last year, in seeing them this year. And then you sprinkle, all around college football saying that, all right, well, if I'm a bettor, how do I even wager on this game knowing that, the coach left, or the coordinators have left, the best players have sat out because they've declared for the NFL draft, or, look how many guys aren't playing because they're in the transfer portal, to where it's like, it feels like you have JV teams out there, high school teams out there. I know that wasn't the case specifically with Alabama, Michigan, but do these games just feel that much less important?
I think that's fair to say. They're important to the schools that have the teams in the games. If you're a Pitt fan, you wanted to see them beat Toledo, or you're a Alabama fan, you wanted to see them beat Michigan. I think it matters to them, and it gives networks good programming that people watch because they like football, and it is something to wager on, although it is a challenge to figure out how teams are going to perform when they are not whole. But that's been a problem really in college football starting probably 20 years ago when coaches started taking jobs and leaving before the bowl games. That's probably when it began. I remember specifically when Brian Kelly left Cincinnati with an undefeated team to go take the Notre Dame job. That was sort of the apotheosis of that particular practice. And then you started to see players opt out. And then you started to see the transfer portal have an impact as well. So all of that has watered the bowl games down a bit. But I've always said, Adam, that the reality is that the people who claim that the bowls have been good for college football aren't telling the truth. The bowls have always been good for the bowls. And that's really all. That's all the further it goes. If you're a player in one of those games, you got a nice trip and maybe a good swag bag. But the games never were consequential beyond whatever game was designated as the national championship game in that particular year.
You mentioned before the Lions and the Vikings, and of course they have such an important Week 18 matchup coming up to determine not only who wins the NFC North, but who gets that first round bye, that number one overall seed in the NFC going into the postseason. And I've been saying for months, Bills, Lions. That's the Super Bowl I believe we will get. It's the Super Bowl that I certainly want as a fan. I think it'd be wildly entertaining. But what I'm wondering is, that bye week, it does matter. If somehow, and I don't believe this will happen, but it could, if somehow Minnesota does win this Week 18 matchup, and we see Detroit have to play in the opening round, they don't get that rest, already dealing with a bunch of injuries, the Lions, does the possibility of Dan Campbell's squad advancing all the way become just a little bit more unrealistic? Do you look at the Lions differently than if they get the one seed?
Well, it becomes a much greater challenge. When the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 2005, they were the first team that was seeded at the bottom of the bracket. They were a 6 at that. They were the 6th seed, even though they were a double-digit win team. Because again, the nature of the playoff seeding, they were the lowest team in the bracket, and they had to win at Cincinnati, at Indianapolis, and then at Denver in order to advance to the Super Bowl. So it is a daunting challenge, and it does make it more difficult, and it kind of makes it more annoying when you're a team like Minnesota, or Detroit. We're talking about you're a team like Detroit that's been fantastic all year, and they make you go on the road. It's ridiculous, and I think there's a little bit of annoyance at that as well, that you have to go prove it against a team that clearly isn't as accomplished as you are, and because of the playoff format still existing as it does, you have to do that. So it would be whoever has to take that lesser seed in this case is at a significant disadvantage without a doubt. There's a lot to play for in that Lions-Vikings game.
So in that this week, you wrote about a vote against, as you put it, Nick Saban being the commissioner of college football. I think we need Mike DeCourcy to be the commissioner of some of these, whether it's college football or the NFL. We need you to come in and rewrite some of this stuff and make it make more sense.
I would love that, especially because Roger Goodell gets paid north of $30 million. So if I could come in and do it for a year and rewrite some of that stuff, and then retire on that $30 million, I think that would be a nice deal. So, Adam, if you have any influence on that, I'm all for it. Not that I don't love the jobs I have now, but heck.
Yeah, that one, I guess it feels a little thankless, but there are a lot of thankless jobs that you could have that don't pay you north of $30 million a year. So, I'll take that one. That sounds pretty good. Mike DeCourcy, again, over at Sporting News, a columnist. He's based out of Pittsburgh. We really appreciate you hopping on with us here on Ferrall Coast to Coast. Happy New Year to you, man.
Happy New Year, Adam, and to everybody listening as well.
Absolutely. Thanks again. We're going to come on back here on SportsGrid. Joe Pisapia.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We are back here on Ferrall Coast to Coast. Our thanks to both Gabe Morency and most recently Mike DeCourcy. A couple of guests out of the chute, but now we get to welcome back the guest host here, much like I am, I guess. We have Joe Pisapia. Joe, welcome back. I imagine you learned a thing or two over the last little bit about how we should be betting these college bowl games. Gabe had plenty of insights, and certainly we'll talk more about the Lions and what they achieved and what's still to be achieved in Week 18 against the Vikings.
Yeah, absolutely. Gabe always does great work, and it was great to have Mike DeCourcy on as well. And yes, we're just guests here today, filling in for our guy, Scotty Ferrall. Shout out to him and the family, and wishing them a good new year also. But yeah, I mean, look, this is a wonderful time for sports right now. And the college football playoff has really changed that dynamic. Is it going to be perfect out of the gate? No. I think we're already seeing that, and everyone's always got something to say about the college football playoff system and how things are going to work and who should be in, who shouldn't be in. When there's only 2 teams in, people complain. When there was 4 teams in, people complain. Of course, you could have 30 teams and people will complain about who's not in it. People are just meant to complain. That's what they do sometimes. But at the same time, I'm not complaining because I think this is a really fun format. And I think it gives everybody an opportunity here, especially at some of these other schools, and you win your conference, you get in, and anything can happen sometimes. Maybe you do slay a giant, and I think it'll be really interesting as the field condenses here, who is left standing. And certainly tonight, we've got Penn State and Boise State, a good game right there. Everyone's looking forward to, and a lot of good games tomorrow also.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that one. Do you have a play already in pocket for the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah, I'm on the Penn State side of things. You know, Genty, I think, is going to get his record. He is a handful. He is fun to watch. If you watch that section tournament there, at the end there, the championship game for them for their conference, it was super fun. Genty was incredibly dynamic runner. And it's funny when you watch guys, you know, especially as a fantasy nerd like I am, you're always trying to put comps on guys. And the one thing that I love about Genty is he's hard to comp. And I think that makes him special. And whenever you get certain players where you're just like, you know, I don't have a comp for this guy, they typically end up being guys that are truly special athletes. And what you've seen, too, in the NFL in the last couple of years is a little bit of a push towards the running back value again. You saw Bijan Robinson go in the top 10. You saw Jahmyr Gibbs get drafted early, right? So what happened was last time we had a running back go top 5, you had Saquon Barkley. That was a while ago, right? Now, all of a sudden, it looks like things are moving back a little bit in that direction, and I think it's mostly because of the quarterback play in the league. It's been very green, some problematic at times, a lot of youth at the position, a lot of inexperience at the position, and I think you've missed out on a lot of those guys that you were thinking were going to lead the charge after the Brady Breeze Manning era was over. The Andrew Lucks of the world, the Jameis Winstons of the world, some of those guys did not really pan out, I think, the way people thought they would. Therefore, all of a sudden, we have a league that is really in a strange have and have not when it comes to quarterback. And I think you're going to see teams continue to start looking at maybe developing that run game a little bit more, especially now that the season's a little longer.
Well, what's really funny, too, and I want to talk more about last night's Lions game against the Niners, but you just kind of got me thinking, so I want to roll with it for a second. I'm looking at the teams that are in the playoffs right now, all right? And obviously, we're going to spend time talking about, like, the Jared Goff-led Lions, the Sam Darnold-led Vikings. You know, you could look, I'm scanning the board. There's, Russell Wilson is sort of dusting himself off now again with Pittsburgh, obviously. They're on the other side of the bracket. We've got, again, Matt Stafford, obviously, in the Rams. He's not in that same category of maybe guys that people gave up on, obviously, but, he was looked as someone, can he do it, when he was in Detroit all those years before ultimately getting over the hump there in that first year with the Rams and now trying to do it again. How good have they been of late? In that 4 seed, though it hasn't been officially clinched yet, the Baker Mayfield-led Buccaneers, a team that, this guy is how many chances has he had now? And he has really found a home and obviously gotten himself paid. And so it's such a fun story. But I think Darnold, Goff, some of these guys, it's really a reminder that some of them do just need a change of scenery. Like I saw somebody, it was Albert Breer, tweet the other day, and it wasn't even like sarcasm. It felt like sarcasm reading it, but it was, man, you look at what Geno Smith has done with Seattle. You look at what Sam Darnold has done with Minnesota. It makes you wonder if somebody should take an honest flyer on Zach Wilson next year. Like maybe some guys just come from crappy systems, terrible organizations, poorly run situations, and need to go somewhere else, get that fresh start, and have an opportunity to flourish. Because nobody saw Minnesota doing with Sam Darnold what it's doing right now. So there's credence to be put into that.
There is. I mean, you're looking at Sam Darnold, too, with coaching. And I think that's what you come back to, how much system matters, coaching matters. Imagine what David Tepper's thinking, right? He had Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold in the same team in 2022 with the Carolina Panthers, the same roster. He let both of them go, right? I mean, imagine what could have been if you just kept one of those guys and were able to develop them properly. But that's the problem, is we're expecting so much of these guys so young. And for every rookie CJ Stroud season or Jaden Daniels season, you get a lot more of the seasons that look more like Bryce Young's rookie season or Caleb Williams' season this year. Why? Because bad teams who draft at the top typically aren't good organizations and aren't good at developing, which is why they're at the top of the draft in the first place. It's a vicious cycle, and it's something that probably should be studied further. But more often than not, it's the lack of patience with these organizations to say, hey, we're going to try to do this the right way. Maybe Caleb Williams is a phenomenal talent, right? Maybe he has got this arm strength, this ability to make plays, do all these special things. But are we built for him to be successful right now? Is it better for him to watch for a year? You think about the quarterbacks, as you mentioned, that are in the playoffs right now. You're starting to look at that playoff. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year, right? Patrick Mahomes for a year. Josh Allen sat for a while. Lamar Jackson sat for a while. Not all these guys were thrown to the wolves.
Jordan Love.
And yet you see Jordan Love, another guy, right? Sat for longer than that. So I think what you're noticing is the organizations that have more patience to do things the right way typically are the ones that are finding themselves in the playoffs right now. And the organizations that are at the top of the draft are there for a reason. And the ones that don't know how to be patient a little bit for the longer, greater good end up hurting the organization in the long term anyway.
Makes you wonder, maybe Bryce Young isn't as god-awful as we've been saying that he is. Just got to give him a little time. Look, last year he was horrendous. He was among, if not the worst quarterback in the NFL. This year he started that way and has finished up mediocre, bad, not good, that sort of thing. We're going to explore a little bit more Lions and Niners when we come on back. I'm going to try and fix this.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Back here with Joe Pisapia. And Joe, you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs earlier, obviously, when talking about Boise State. He was just such a force yesterday for the Lions in that comeback win, 40-34 at Santa Clara. Went 18 for 117 on the ground, had a touchdown because, of course, he did. Even with those Christian McCaffrey-like odds of like minus 330 on the anytime touchdown, just parlay piece, man, because Gibbs naturally found the end zone. And then in the air, 4 for 46. No David Montgomery. It was that much more pressure the last couple of weeks on Gibbs, more of a workload, all of it. And he has been incredibly dominant. You consider, last night, and it was sweaty if you were on the Lions, 7-0, 14-6, 21-13, 28-21, all deficits for Detroit before 19 unanswered to go up 40-28 in that contest. And Detroit picking up its first win against San Francisco since 2015. But even more notable than that, in my opinion, is the fact that, it's not that long ago, Joe, that we were talking about a Lions team that couldn't win, period. Like winless Detroit. And last night capped an undefeated season on the road. That's amazing to me about how far this team has come and how loaded, honestly, this roster is. And I'm not sure we can give Dan Campbell quite enough credit. First, though, let's hear from Campbell about why he decided to go with all of his guys in a game that was completely meaningless.
Yeah, it was on my mind. I thought a lot about it. I thought about it leading up to the game. I thought about it last night. I told the staff. But I ended up settling on the right thing to do was play these guys. And because we owed it to the team, and it was just one of those positions we were in. It's just hard to say who you're going to sit. And it's not fair to ask guys to play that haven't been prepared to play, So yeah, that was tough. And I think the biggest thing is there was things we wanted to do better than we did last week, and we did. We cleaned a lot of things up offensively. I thought defensively we talked about getting takeaways. We got takeaways, and so that'll always serve you well going into the next week. And look, there was never going to be anything we knew what this is. You're out on the West Coast, you go, man, it's all good. That's what we do. You know what I mean? This is what we do. Like, we love it hard. And this is our deal right now. So we're looking forward to this, everything about this week.
Joe, hindsight's 2020. You know, if Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt last night, Campbell is chastised to the degrees that are unimaginable right now. But you make it out unscathed. Everybody's healthy. You win. And one, they look great. Bettors who invested are happy, all of that. But also, and this wasn't part of the cut you just heard, but I appreciated what Campbell said after, and he alluded to this, but he dropped like Hendon Hooker, the backup quarterback by name, saying like, that's not fair to Hook for me to ask him to go out. He's completely unprepared. He's not taking first team reps. Those reps belong to Jared Goff in practice. If I throw him out there, like, what's he supposed to do? What can I realistically expect him to do? So to him, and other people might not look at it this way, but to him, that was kind of coaching malpractice to go out and throw guys out that don't belong out there.
No, I agree. Look, I'm a Patriots fan since the 1993 season, okay? So before Bill Belichick,
I knew we got along.
Do subscribe to the Patriot way of, you do play the guys because sometimes people get stale. I just want to put this out there, too, that I don't think people are really taking the Vikings seriously enough. I mean, all these good things about Dan Campbell and the Lions, and it is true. They've handled their business more often than not. However, the last time these two teams faced each other, it was a time where they were coming back from London. They were a undefeated team, the Vikings. Coming back from London's always a weird vibe. They barely lost that game to the Lions, right? They fell short by a couple points. They lost the next week in week 8 to the Rams. The Vikings haven't lost a game since. And it's very interesting to me that everyone keeps talking about, the Dan Campbell and the grittiness of that. But how about the grittiness of basically the Minnesota Vikings having one little hiccup in the season and being so dominant? And I don't think people have talked about enough how dominant the Vikings have been defensively and how well Sam Darnold really has played in this new scenario for Minnesota.
I know we have to break in a minute. Mafia, can we see the Coach of the Year odds real quick and what this board looks like? Because Dan Campbell, I'm sure, obviously, like some people would like to look at Campbell, and he's second, plus 750. You see it there. But to your point, Kevin O'Connell is minus 1,600, and he should be. He should run away with this, Joe.
He should. What he's done with Sam Darnold, a quarterback that several organizations did not want, and what he's done here after the big-time quarterback drafted didn't work out because of injury, it's an incredible job. He's remade a career and now giving the Vikings confidence. We'll be right back with more Ferrall after this.
In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.